So we'll quickly move on to the next. Next is a brilliant panel. It's so relevant to what's happening here at the 10th edition of Matrix Global Summit 2025. The topic is funding deep tech and innovative startup, a view from the trenches themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, I call upon the panel one by one, and it would be great if you could rise up your energy and give a big round of applause as I call them one by one. First up, may I please request Mr. Naganand D, Managing Partner, Idea Spring Capital, to kindly come and join us, please. Next up, may I please request Mr. Arjun Rao, Partner, Speciale Invest, to kindly come and join us. Lastly, I want to call one more time back to the stage Mr. Narendra Bhandari, please, General Partner, C Fund, to kindly come and join us. Okay, that's a great panel. A great panel requires a great moderator as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the moderator. For this session, may I request Ravindra Krishnappa, Partner, July Ventures, to kindly come up, join it onto the stage, please, for moderating this wonderful session. Okay, just one thing before I leave. Can we single-handedly have a big round of applause for the panel, for the moderator? Thank you. That's brilliant. Over to you, sir.
All right. So we are not going to introduce ourselves. I think we have done enough of that. I've also been told that we have a time crunch, so we'll try and get right in. I see not very many faces, so we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible. So I'll like to leave some time for Q&A as we go through. Right. The only thing I would probably make an exception is to congratulate Naga. He's just won an award. You'll go read up about it as we go through. We're all proud of what he's done. I picked the word magic when Pranav was presenting. So we have this definition of, we have had a hard time defining what is deep tech, right? We have had this over a period of time. And the only thing that reminds me is Arthur C. Clarke's statement that any sufficiently good technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? So if you have to have magic happen in India, I'm going to use a format where I will make a statement and I want each one of you to pick whether you want to do a for or against of that particular topic. And the reason I'm making this is because I want a bit of a debate, right, as we go through. So the statement that I'm going to make, and actually whether you think it's going to happen or not going to happen, and then we will go back very quickly, dive into that. So the first statement that I'll make is that the next global deep tech unicorn will come from India within the next 5 years. Who wants to pick for? Who wants to pick against? You'll pick for? No, he's picking for. You are against? I need somebody against. Because he's got a minute to make his case, then you'll get your minute to make the against of it. Who wants to go against?
The next one coming from where is the question?
The next global deep tech unicorn will come from India within 5 years. So there's a time, and we are calling it a global deep tech unicorn.
It's hard to say no to that.
So he's also for. Yeah, you have to create it.
All these things can always be debated either way.
Okay, so let's go with the for. You have choice. You pick the for.
Yeah, I think
Narendra is still thinking through this.
Yeah, I think obviously some of the stage has been set by what Pranav mentioned just before this, and that was a very deep and very precise, representation of where we are. From our perspective, what we are observing is we are sort of in cohort 1 and just maybe cohort 2 starting for deep tech from India, right? A lot of this is for India. Maybe 70%, 80%, maybe 20% is for the world, right? Or is a global deep tech, as you pointed out. And the majority of the first cohort, if you think about it, if it is anywhere between 7 to 10 years old, then we are getting very close to that place where these companies will have close to 100 million or above 50 million revenue, close to 100 million revenue, which can possibly value them at 1 billion and above, right? And therefore, it feels like the next, actually, well earlier than 5 years, we should see unicorns coined that are deep tech from India, which could be hybrid, which could be some India domestic plays, which could be some global plays. So hence the confidence saying the first cohort, which is about 7, 8 years old, I think in 10 to 12 years they should get over the line.
So you're getting into the golden period of 7 to 10 years worth of maturity. Naga.
So I think if you want to get to unicorn status global, I think ability to sell global is what you have to look at. And if you look at how many companies in that space actually are selling global is very, very few. So, when to get to unicorn status, you obviously have to have enough of a representation that some of them will make it. But today, I don't see a whole lot of companies, and I can give examples for Tombo or some such companies. There are not that many companies that we believe are there existing selling to the global market from India, an Indian-based company. So argument I'm thinking is like if you have at least 10, at least one or two will make it. But if you only two, saying that one of the two will make it is a hard probabilistic game. So that's the only. Although I'm confident that something will happen. Since I have picked no, I have to argue that probabilistically, one out of two is a lot harder game than 1 out of 10, right? So that's the reason. That's the only reason I'm going to.
You think you think there is a chance, but the chance is not.
That's it.
Doesn't
Probabilistic.
the probabilistic chance is not good enough. All right, Narendra.
Tech unicorns, I mean, hitting in the next 5 years will happen. I think the only color there is global, to your point, right?
Right.
Global is a bit of a question mark. Unicorns will happen, tech unicorns will happen 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they'll keep happening. The mix of global versus local market is going to be the question, right? And product-led growth can take you to be global. Global can be 3 countries, global can be 50 countries. That's another shade of it in terms of how they go off and sell. And to Naga's point, is there evidence of a lot of people today selling global, at 30%, 40% of their revenues? That evidence is low, but I think, with pitches like what Pranav mentioned and push from a whole bunch of, funding and other sources, chances of that happening is there. We're not bleak. It's not a 0-1 game.
Okay, so follow through on that. Follow through on that.
So I'll tell you one other fundamental difference in deep tech revenue, right? When you look at what we are used to, whether it's services revenue or software revenue, product-led growth, for example, can work very well. And you can scale very quickly because you can sell something, you can deploy something sitting in one corner somewhere in the world. But I think when you start looking at deep tech companies, that kind of sales doesn't happen anymore. Because it is actually, you have to be on the ground selling something, and you have to be supporting something, you have to build the entire ecosystem. Invariably, if you really say deep tech, it's a sciences or a hardware is somehow involved one way or the other. And the sales friction goes up, support friction goes up. So the scale, achieving the scale becomes very, very difficult compared to that.
Hold that thought, because my next point, I'll just take a segue on that and come back. The next point I had was a statement I'm going to make, and then you have to kind of figure out and justify. I'm making a statement that hardware deep tech won't scale out of India. Only software will. I'm making a statement, right? I'm not justifying it. Because we have heard this piece about hardware is very tough, it's got 7-year life cycle, it has got 10-year life cycle, there are IP issues, our PLI doesn't cover, we are not in the 5-micron stage. So I've heard lots of things associated with the chip and the hardware side.
Put it this way, hardware will need a market outside India. Right? I mean, there are very few technologies which is selling only in India and they can get unicorn. A lot of the hardware will need to go abroad, right? Which will also play back because once it goes abroad, then our Indian customers will also wake up and say, oh, acha, bahar bech, so then we can buy also here. So there will be that little bit of a dichotomy.
Do we have the force to?
I think the deal is if you look at even semiconductors today, we can talk what we want, but we know when you want to actually build a successful chip company, it's a 4-year cycle before that from the point of conception to actually that going and sitting on some board. Now, we don't even have that ecosystem in India. ODMs don't exist. You don't know who I'm going to sell to, who's going to buy your chip, who's going to guarantee that if you develop this chip, I'm going to deploy. I think that's why, I think you have to go outside is very hard. So to Pranav's point, right, I'm going to come back to that. It's very, very hard when you don't have the market. I think the biggest issue we are going to face, although we are all investing in that sector, very focused, I think what keeps us awake at the night is where is the market? Who am I going to sell it to? Why is somebody going to buy it? And how do I scale? I think that question is still not answered. And your other question on software as hardware, in my own head, saying software is deep tech, there are very few companies that kind of cross that benchmark of saying, yeah, this is a software company, but it's still deep tech. Because it's been there for 30, 40 years, and once in a way you'll get a foundation model which comes out of the university, and that can be actually deployed. But the deployment, if you look at what happened in this particular case, also the research happened in the university, but the deployment happened completely by the industry. Right? 4 or 5 companies went and deployed it. Now, that is, I don't know if you categorize that as deep tech or scale. Because the research is what is deep tech, but this is just scale, right? So I think software deep tech is still, I have a hard time in saying how to classify it. However, when it comes to life sciences and it comes to bio or bioengineering or other hardware, it is easier to do it because of how much harder problem to solve.
Yeah, I think the answer from my perspective is somewhere in the middle in terms of it depends on industry, right? Uh, there are certain industries which are heavy on will be constrained by domestic markets, right? Defense is obviously a classic example of that. We'd like to think that there are much more, lighter boundaries and more open boundaries on areas such as semiconductor, areas such as, let's say, space also, right? Because there are so few countries and companies doing it, but there's massive global demand, right? Can we cross that line, which Naganan mentioned in terms of is hard enterprise sales, right? The time that it takes, the face-to-face approach that it takes, right? What gives me confidence is, if you get over the line, you get very large multi-year, multi-tens of $1 million of contracts, right? We're talking about Anduril getting $20 billion contract. We have to talk about $20 million contracts, right? So it is hard. It hasn't been done disproportionately many times over the last 15, 20 years. But if you get over that complexity, then the prizes can be big. So sector by sector, many global opportunities, some sectors very specific to India, and we have to be constrained by that.
So this bit on defense keeps coming up, right? Every time we have had this, Pranav mentioned that, we talked about it, and then we say that, there is a dichotomy here. Defense is essentially an India play, if you think about it, from not a global play. So there is a need, there's no dispute on the need, but it will not get us, I don't know if it will get us the dividends that, some of the other things bring, because at some stage, for a commercialization of a defense technology to go into, there has to be others will absorb it, right? So if you take the US space, there were others willing to absorb that. And given that we don't have industry play, right? Do you think defense itself is going to convert? So again, do you think it's going to happen or do you think it's not going to happen? I want a hard stance. Do you think our focus on defense is going to pay off unless the industry steps up to accept this and commercialize it in a non-defense economy?
So I think, like I said, you'll see a lot more things happen when your economy reaches a certain level. At 4.5 trillion, very, very hard. If you get to 10, 15, then things start to happen. Right? And then defense changing is very behavioral. You know how hard it is to change behavior. And you say, like saying, get rid of corruption. Not going to happen. Right? And then you standardize corruption. That's the only thing that can happen. And similarly, defense.
Or create a Tatkal equivalent, right? You pay for it.
I don't know if you heard Mohan speak recently about that, but it's a very hard behavioral change in terms of defense buying pattern. So we have a thesis that if I'm investing in any deep tech, it has to have an enterprise use case and a defense use case. Now, how much you're going to sell in the enterprise in India, we don't know, but at least you sell some so the defense starts to buy, and then once the defense starts to buy, you can start selling it outside. The biggest problem in deep tech, like I was telling before, is how the hell you sell outside of India, right? Because even selling software itself is hard for us. Now suddenly you say, no, it's not hardware, you're selling something else. It becomes even harder. And even if you take life sciences, even if you develop a molecule, you'll probably end up licensing it to somebody because you don't have the deep pockets to go and say, now I will monetize this drug. We just don't have the capability. We're just doing generics. So there's a lot of learning and patience and all those things needs to come in. That said, there are 2, 3 examples I think where Indian startups are really doing well. I spent a lot of time with Pawan on Skyroot last week. I mean, people are standing in queue to fund him. All right, so he has raised 100 million. Now he's raising another 50 million to send satellites, and he's been building launch vehicles. And if you look at his particular use case, it is satellites are coming to India to be deployed from his launch vehicle, right? So even if you're based in India, people are coming to you to deploy something. I think those are the kind of plays that you can really succeed in, where you say, no, I'm not going to go sell outside. I'm going to market outside, but sale will happen in India, right? So in those cases, it's a combination of a defense use case, and you have private players coming in. So my thesis is you cannot just depend on defense. You have to have a private enterprise use case. And in the private enterprise use case, if people are coming to you rather than you going out, it works lot better, because you going and building partnerships or channels to sell your products takes much larger time, as opposed to attracting people to come to India, right? So in the space sector particularly, there's one example that one could take as to how a deep tech ecosystem has developed in India. That is one sector. Now the question is, how easy is it to replicate to the quantum or bio or medicine, the 3D printing? How easy is it to replicate? I think that has to be seen, and we have to work on that. But bottom line is, till you get to 10 to 15, you have to get enterprises from outside the country to come and sell, do something in India.
Do you think space is a good area because it has a commercialization
I think
aspect?
you built a good example, right?
Okay.
In terms of how to build deep tech startups that are scalable, I think in space we have because I'm saying not one startup. There are a bunch of companies that are doing well, right? So I think it's as a sector they have done well. I think we should see how to replicate.
Okay.
Quick reaction just on that, right? I think space is also unique as an industry, right? And India is unique in space even before we started privatization, right? And that's a great advantage, and we have to just ride on that. That's a great example. It's also about sending things outside Earth, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, boundaries are anyway gone. You can launch from anywhere, right?
So
Customers
the
are waiting.
international aspect is already built
In a way, built into
I don't
it,
have to
right?
worry about
it's
FDA, I don't
which
have
may
to
not
worry
be
about-
true in manufacturing, may or may not be. There may be slices of that. So there is a nuance there. The other thing that I will not fully disagree, but I will add a layer is of dual use, so to speak, right? And in dual use, I think it is a time horizon thing. And if you take a 5 to 8 year time horizon, I will say, you know, crack defense first, right? Get that right, really consolidate, and therefore, obviously, more domestic than global. I think it'll take the second 7, 8 year horizon, which is closer to 15 years, where enterprise commercial usage and use cases start emerging, and enough revenue kicks in on cutting edge deep tech on some of those. So that's my limited view. So time horizon difference: 5 years defense, 15 years defense plus dual use. If you want to build think about the $1 billion outcome, single use defense. If you want to think about a $5 to $10 billion outcome,
Dual
then
use.
dual use.
Just on that piece, so from if not, if you go to that sequence, defense, space, what would be the next sector that you want to think is going to kind of work?
Just to finish the space argument, I'll give you one more example. Some of you know we invested in a company called Take Me to Space. Now, all he's doing is building compute in space. Right? When we originally sat down, Manoj and Mahesh and everything, yeah, क्या करेगा satellite में compute डाल के, right? And was the thesis. And we went with the thesis that very simply compute demand, somehow the world has more compute demand than ever. And the deal was done, closed. In fact, at TGS, they were even profiled and stuff. China has announced a plan to put 2,800 compute satellites. Right now, most of it may be defense, most of it may be just Earth observation and stuff. Right.
So it's edge moving up there, right? The edge is there. Edge is the space.
the scale at which they're executing is just not even imaginable sometimes, right? So space to that point, and then of course these guys are going next round, and now like Naga said, people are lining up to saying take more money. Now to your question, what after defense and the same, I'm still very optimistic on basic compute, right? I mean everything around basic compute, right? I mean um, we are consuming stuff at the highest rate ever in history in terms of total MIPS consumed per day. If you look at it, total sort of compute cycles consumed every day, it's probably highest in the history and growing every day, I think, right? Every day. So that basically, brings to the fact that there's enough compute demand over the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? Now, quantum compute may make it far more efficient and stuff, right? In fact, I don't know if Ananta is still there. I saw Ananta, one of our, there he is, right? So these guys are building a chip, they've got their first chip out, where they're saying, we'll do compute, but we'll do compute maybe 30, 40% more efficient than somebody else, right? Now, while the energy is free, you still need to make it more efficient. I personally think compute, just not in the data centers, compute in practically everywhere, everything we see is going to be there. So if you can try and get into that space, hardware, software, layers, sensors, whatever combination, if nothing else, very boring, just manage all the compute stuff deployed.
Got it. So, in the interest of time, last question, and again, not a question, a statement. If the government has to do the equivalent of a $20 billion and spend somewhere, there's an argument that it should go into core sciences and not so much about software. The reason being that a lot of our MSc, PhD, the argument is, are coming out as not as a choice, but a lot of people who are graduating from BSc, and there are fewer and fewer numbers going into core sciences, pure sciences, needs to change. Because if you take things like materials, whether it's bio or non-bio, traditional coatings, any of these other things that you want to go look at materials, we seem to be lacking way beyond. We don't even have the chemical strength that China has built up, right? A lot of our input chemicals come from outside. So what would a recommendation be in terms of an allocation? Are we saying the government has to allocate money into deep tech? It should allocate money into people, the preparedness, the infrastructure, the PLI scheme?
So I think, Ravi, it's very hard to pick one, right? Because I'll tell you, for there are three legs that are important for deep tech for it to survive and prosper. There's a market leg, there's a capital leg, and there's a talent leg. I think efforts have to be made in all three, and I think I would say if there's something that we have to put serious effort, it's talent. Now, if you ask a question, I keep asking this question for myself. If there's a PhD graduate in India in engineering, which company will they apply to? How many companies hire PhDs?
So if they go,
Zero,
right, they
right?
decides to go abroad and then
It's not. Say you graduate with a PhD degree. How many companies will have the ability to hire a PhD today? It's like horrible, right? That's the state of affairs that we have. So I think, if you really want to make progress in this, in all the three legs, we need investments across that. But I think talent takes the longest time. So talent, you're looking at a 10 to 15-year horizon, right? If you look at China, they have 6 universities out of the top 10 today. Well, it's been a 20, 25-year journey. So if my bias is go for talent, build universities because that's where things start. And then once you have that talent base, then capital and will come in, and by the time you reach 10, 15 trillion, market will come in.
And that's not a VC play, right?
Yeah.
That's also
You have to do that. Talent, we suck in talent today.
You agree?
Good.
Just to quickly add on that, I think no question, 100% I would go in the direction, taking a decadal view, if you will, right? That foundational layer of how much talent is coming out at what layers, definitely that spawns off research also, which can then be commercialized, is immensely valuable. I'm just the other thing that is happening in parallel and will seemingly accelerate is what in the last possibly 20, 30 years in our ecosystem has been the sort of that, I don't know what to call it, but it's that middle of engineering graduates, right? And there was a place they could all go, which was a burgeoning software industry, right? Whether it was civil engineers or computer science engineers, everybody went into services and then product and right, and they could make a decentish living. And suddenly, we can now see that AI, possibly at the middle to lower level, will possibly
Disrupt
impact.
that piece.
Yeah, right.
So
That
you
you
don't have
cannot
a place
hire
to
so
go.
many
Yeah.
thousands of people that young graduates that could get hired just out of undergrad. That didn't matter what discipline, because you had to write some code or you had to maintain some code. If those jobs are not available, then it is imperative, right? Then that we further enhance that they can do further studies, right? They can do master's, PhD, and then, like Nagar rightly said, after that they have to have the right opportunities and get commensurately, compensated. So both these things are happening in parallel. Standard managed software build basic new software jobs 10 years forward, brutally hard. You cannot place lakhs of engineering grads there. We need deeper research, more talent on all these sciences and technologies, and then we need to place them.
One thing on talent, I personally have far less patience. I don't think the government is going to solve the talent problem. I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to come a little bit from the private. They can throw money. So it's a proposal. We, even when I was with Intel, we had this challenge: is how do you grow the stuff in? And then one or two forums have spoken briefly about it. But let me just say this here, right? We think that, at least my view is that government should invest in bringing, let's say, 1,000 PhDs back, as an example. PhD, I'm just using as a connotation. Pick 5 sectors which are important for India. Go across the globe and just bring back every top-notch thinker, researcher, doer in that area. And the bill for that is not very big. I've done the math. I have it somewhere in one of my notes, right? Which is, the cost of bringing back a PhD or a thinker into India and literally funding their life for 5 years or 7 years is not more than a few crores, right?
Okay.
Uh,
So it's money well spent just to bring the ecosystem.
It's not about spend. That money is going to give you multiplier
Well invested.
value,
Got it.
right? If you bring back 1,000 PhDs in 5 sectors, place them, put them on mission mode, align them to universities or whatever, you will lift a lot of boats. Lot of boats you're going to lift, right? And big problems. I mean, you asked which sector. Big problems which are relevant to India, right? Whether it's healthcare, education, etc., etc. The other view, just one more point, is on, since we were talking about trenches somewhere, right? All of us talk to startups, whether they're portfolio companies or new companies, right? The problems they describe, when we chat with them in more detail, are not for the faint-hearted, right? I mean, what the founders go through every day, every week, are not for the faint-hearted, right? So, if, like you asked, the question you asked, where should the government sort of spend money, right? I think grants definitely help.
Right.
And my view is grants, at the 50 lakh, 1 crore, 2 crore, 5 crore level, it's done. I mean, it's happening, right? You have to now start thinking that if I want, as an example, 10 semiconductor companies making $100 million revenue in 10 years or 5 to 7 years, you're going to have to start upping that game from a government perspective at 100 to 500 crore level.
Sure.
Whether it's a grant or equity or whatever financial engineering the geniuses can figure out. But without that level of commitment and support and market, it's going to be difficult at the trenches level. 90% what's going to happen is they're going to, cross borders and do stuff there. If you want to retain that here, you're going to have to, money where to spend, I would bring back talent and improve the talent
And then
problem.
create an ecosystem there.
Pick the slightly better winners and double down, triple down, tenfold down money into them in whatever form you can.
100x.
100x, right?
Okay.
100x in terms of capital, not talk, not just some, mission, vision, all that stuff which is happening. Get it into the hands of startups.
I think the other, sorry, just as he was saying this, it was crossing my mind, and we've all been in rooms and in panels where we've discussed where the government should deploy capital. But one of the things, uh, China did very well amongst, of course, their political structure being different, which is hard to, comment about, but was in critical sectors, and there are many, right? It's not four sectors, it is, I think Pranav listed 16 and he said there are 25 or something like that, right? What they did was they spawned, first they did capital allocation decentralized, right, which is very critical. Number one. Number two, say you want to spawn off massive competition very quickly, right? You want to have 100 startups in a specific domain because then, and then you want the top 10 to rise up as a cream, because that also leads to what we talk about when we talk about macro markets. We also have to talk about supply chain markets, right? You need component markets, tier 1 supplier, tier 2 supplier. If you have 100 players, then somebody is going to build a supplier company also, right? But today feels like, oh, what are we going to supply two companies for? Right? That doesn't make sense. And look at our auto industry in some sense, right? It has benefited from that. This tier one, tier two, tier three, they're very structured, they're reasonably scaled. So that replication in many critical areas, I don't know how to do that and how that decentralized substantial amount of 100x capital can come in, but that's, I guess, what we need to some degree.
I think we should close with that, otherwise we'll continue on. I know I've been asked to see if we can close earlier than please. If there are a couple of questions, maybe we can take a couple. We'll try to keep it as quick and yeah, we can pass the mic around. I'll pass the mic. There was one other. Can we just get a couple of questions if that's okay, and then close.
Quick question. So, where is the fund of funds for deep tech? You guys are all the movers and shakers. So, what's happening to that? And this is related to the government. How is the government going to really deep fund deep techs? That's the first part of it. The second question relates to the faculty, research, etc. Um, what are VCs, that is folks like you, doing to really make that happen, which is get either the profs or get the startups to engage with thinkers? Is that happening, and how are you guys enabling it from your end?
So fund of funds, Anand, the government is looking at a 10,000 crore deep tech fund now. That is, MIT is supporting that. That is outside of what the government gave for 10,000 for VC market. So there's a focus there. There's one. And then there are also very, very focused efforts on quantum and AI, where they're picking 5, 10 companies and supporting them. So this is happening in bits and pieces. It can happen at a much larger scale, but I think there are at least beginnings of what needs to happen. So that's on the fund of fund side.
So the one piece that you have to understand, the fund of fund, the structure of the fund of fund is going back to the SIDBI kind of a piece where they are looking for a certain commitment and deployment, and they're looking for a certain lead to be taken by the VCs from, or whoever else is a commercial piece. It is still not the grant one that we talked about. In some ways, I think, if you ask me where is the piece, all of this needs a certain amount of pre-committed capital, which can then attract other capital. I think that is still a problem to be solved.
So like you will get multiplying factor of 4 or 5. So if you create $10,000 deep tech fund, you will eventually see 50,000 crores coming into the market, and that will spur innovation and things like that. So I think that there is some visibility into that space. Coming to VCs doing with academics very, very hard. There is not enough money to actually come out and say, we'll support it. The only thing I think, at least from if I speak to myself, we are doing is go to universities, say, talk to profs and say, if you are a startup, let's do it, we'll fund it. I think that cycle we are starting. So we are only in the very, very early stage of starting that cycle. And the next could be, all right, we'll fund, and then we are looking at that. Now we'll find 1 or 2 EIRs, the guys who are doing postdoc research, and then you support the postdoc research with the intention that if something comes out of it, now you fund that startup. So I think it's all very, very minimalistic early beginnings on the university side, and that's why we are saying, I don't think VCs are the right guys to support universities. Not going to happen. The kind of capital that will be required is humongous, and you don't have it. You can do very, very small additions to what happens in the university system. I don't think you should expect from the VCs at all. Not. I think that's why I'm saying government regulations has to come in. See, the deal is, even when institutions have to generate revenues, there are other regulations that control what can happen, how many seats you can take, what can you do, who can you hire, reservations for the professors, a whole bunch of things, right? So that's what unraveling of policies is required, and I don't know when, how, and these things will happen, but we are where we are in India with respect to that.
Yeah, I think just quickly concurring and adding to say, what are we doing? We are telling them we exist, right? By hopefully visiting a few times and learning what research they're working on, etc. Second, of course, these universities, if they're saying, hey, you can take you're a professor for 10 years or 15 years, you can take 2 years off, right? Either sabbatical, and etc. And therefore, they know they can take time off but still be associated with the university and try an entrepreneurial idea or their research to convert it into this thing. And they know that maybe there's 2 million, 3 million, 5 million available from VC plus grant. Then, a fair few of them or some of them at least can come out and start companies. And, if it kicks on after that first 2 years, they have a choice, right? Do they want to continue building a business or do they want to, be a professor? Either way.
Okay, there was one more question there. Otherwise, we'll yeah. Can we pass or just stand up and in the interest of time, I think we want to close.
Good evening. Thank you, panel. That was a very fulfilling and enriching conversation. Vidya here. I'm from Walk Water Talent Advisors, and we help a lot of startups and VCs in their leadership hiring. You all shared the same sentiment when it came to talent and building it from grounds up as well as at a leadership level. But in your view and opinion, is there already a playbook that exists in the industry where there's talent available and which can be replicated just to shorten the gap while we build it up from grounds up, and as well as thinking of returning of PhDs, which is from a time constraint standpoint? What are your views there?
I don't know if
Jokingly saying, keep Trump for another 4 years.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
get
all. He'll do all the work for us.
Quickest way to build talent in India.
Yeah, so let him stop all the H1s and a few others. I think we'll have a lot more talent coming back. But the other side is true. What Arjun talked about. You are going to see people look at other choices because what was traditionally I pass engineering, go to MBA, then go to Wells Fargo is not a one that I think. Hopefully, or a JP Morgan is hopefully not a piece that they will pick.
I think the younger gen who's now going to US are very clear that there's a 50 to 70% chance they're coming back very soon, and they've sort of planned their life that way. Probably mentally, there's always the folks who are still figuring out how to settle down, but very different from the routes many of us took. A lot of talent will come back. A lot of the US educated kids are going to come back.
With that note of optimism, according to me, I think we'll close and we'll let Trump do his work. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have the three of you here, please. Thanks.
Thank you. We want all of you to stay back. Ladies and gentlemen, for a fantastic panel session, I think it calls out for one more round of applause, please, for that. Well, we want to present a small token of thank you from our side for you, so we're not going to let you go before that. May I please request Mr. Arvind Tiwari to kindly come and join us, please. Chair Emeritus Matters Forum to kindly come and join us, please.